AITA for ditching my girlfriend at a restaurant, which contributed to her failing her probationary period at work. I have been in a relationship with my girlfriend, Cindy, since university. We met during our second year, and for the most part, things were good. We had a lot of the same interests, similar sense of humor, and it was always nice to be with someone who understood the pressures of our field. We both majored in the same thing, not going to get into the exact industry because it does not really matter, but it is one of those fields where you really need to hustle early in your career to make any headway. Cindy and I were both pretty motivated back in university, so I had no reason to think that would change once we graduated. Fast forward to last September, and Cindy's company went under. It was not a huge shock to me. She had been venting for months about how they were bleeding money, cutting little corners, and how morale had started tanking well before they officially shut down. But even with all the warning signs, Cindy took it really, really hard. She loved that place. I do not know how else to say it, she just absolutely loved her workplace. She was constantly talking about her colleagues like they were family, and she had this huge amount of respect for her boss too. It was the kind of rare work environment where everyone seemed to genuinely like each other, so when it all fell apart, it hit Cindy like a truck. The day she came home and broke the news to me, I could tell she was trying not to cry. She was putting on this brave face like it was not a big deal, but I could see the cracks forming. I asked her if she wanted me to introduce her to my boss. Like I said, we are in the same field, and my company is always hiring in some capacity. It was not a guaranteed job or anything, but it was a solid lead. Cindy said yes almost immediately, which surprised me a little. I had kind of expected her to want to decompress for a bit, but I guess the panic over being unemployed kicked in fast. I texted my boss right there on the spot, and to his credit, he got back to me pretty fast. After sending over her CV and a quick interview process, they offered her a 3-month probationary position. I was honestly thrilled at the time. The thought of working with her felt like this perfect blend of practical and romantic. We could carpool, save money on gas, and have lunch together every day. It felt like a win-win, or at least it did in my head. What I did not realize was that Cindy's work habits had done a complete 180 since university. To put it bluntly, she was a terrible employee. I am not even trying to sugarcoat it because there is really no other way to say it. From her first week, it was obvious something was off. She showed up to the office 15, sometimes 20 minutes late, every single day. At first, I made excuses for her, traffic, overslept, whatever. But after a while, the pattern became impossible to ignore. The carpooling plan was dead on arrival. I have a regular morning meeting every single day, and I need to be at my desk at least 15 minutes early to prep for it. Cindy, on the other hand, had this bizarre inability to leave the house on time. No matter how much warning I gave her, how many alarms she set, or how much I nudged her to get a move on, she would still somehow find a way to stall until we were already running late. After a week, I gave up and told her she would need to drive herself because I could not keep showing up late to my own meetings. That was not exactly a fun conversation, but I figured she would at least take the hint that punctuality was a problem. Spoiler alert, she did not. At work, things were even worse. Her favorite activity, and I am not exaggerating here, was opening up a blank Google Doc and just staring at her phone under her desk. I would walk past her cubicle and see the screen lit up with absolutely nothing on it, just a white document, while she mindlessly scrolled through social media. She took every possible opportunity to stretch her breaks, sometimes disappearing for an hour and a half when we only get an hour for lunch. I tried dropping hints, offering to help her get organized, suggesting tools she could use to manage her time better. Nothing stuck. She was completely disengaged. This went on for the entire 3-month probationary period. By the end of it, everyone, including my boss, knew she was dead weight. I was embarrassed, honestly. I felt like I had vouched for her, and she was making me look like an idiot. But I still held out this tiny bit of hope that she would pull it together before her probation review. Then came last Monday. That was the first day in what felt like forever that Cindy was actually ready to leave on time. I do not know if it was my constant gentle urging, read, increasingly frustrated nagging, or the looming end of her probation, but she was finally ready to carpool again. I let myself feel a flicker of optimism. Maybe this was a turning point. We went out to lunch together that day, and everything was fine, until it wasn't. Cindy has this tendency to eat painfully slowly, like she has all the time in the world. I was watching the clock, subtly nudging her to pick up the pace, but she just kept dragging her feet. Right when we were supposed to be heading back, Cindy decided she absolutely needed another refill of her soda. The restaurant was crowded, we could not get a server's attention, and time was ticking. I told her we had to go, not asked, told, but she dug her heels in and refused to budge. She insisted she could not leave without one more refill, like her entire day hinged on it. At that point, I was done. I put the cash for the meal and the tip on the table, told her I was leaving, and walked out. I think she thought I was bluffing, that I would just stand there and wait her out. But I didn't. I got in my car and drove back to the office without her. Cindy showed up 20 minutes later, visibly flustered. The restaurant was a 10-minute walk away, so she definitely got her refill. I did not say anything about it, there was nothing to say at that point, but I could feel the storm brewing. Friday was her final probationary review, and to absolutely no one's surprise, they decided not to hire her full-time. Her punctuality, her lack of direction, her sheer unwillingness to actually do her job, it all caught up with her. And somehow, Cindy decided all of this was my fault. She blamed me for everything. She said I made her late and that my leaving her at the restaurant was the final nail in her coffin. She refused to acknowledge the months of consistent lateness, the aimless workdays, the long lunches, none of it mattered. In her mind, it all boiled down to me abandoning her over a soda refill. The cherry on top was last night, when she asked how she was supposed to pay her share of the rent now that she was unemployed. I looked at her and said, "Yes, that is a good question. How will you be paying?" That was apparently the worst thing I could have said, because she completely shut down after that. No yelling, no fighting, just cold silence. Now, I am stuck wondering if I handled all of this wrong. Was I too harsh? Should I have been more supportive, even though she was tanking her own chances? I do not know anymore. But honestly, I feel like I was watching someone self-sabotage in slow motion, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. Was I the asshole for what I did? Update 1. After the whole mess with Cindy losing her job and blaming me for it, things at home got tense. I expected that much, there is no way someone would just let something like that roll off their back, but what I did not expect was how fast Cindy decided to fully lean into her victim mentality. She was unemployed now, but instead of updating her resume or applying to jobs, she announced to me, like it was some grand revelation, that she was going to take some time off work for her mental health. I will be the first to say that mental health is important, and if someone genuinely needs a break to get their head right, they should take it if they can afford to. But that is the thing, Cindy absolutely could not afford to. She had no savings. None. Not even a rainy day fund or a forgotten emergency fund in a side account. Every paycheck she got had been spent down to the cent, and even that was with me covering a disproportionate chunk of our rent and groceries. So when she told me she was taking time off, my first reaction was to ask, calmly, how exactly she planned to contribute to rent, groceries, and utilities. Cindy barely looked up from her phone when she said that was not my concern. That was the moment something shifted for me. It was not even the fact that she expected me to magically cover everything. It was the casual entitlement, like her financial well-being was now solely my responsibility by default. I did not want to dance around it or play games, so I decided to be upfront and flat out told her not to expect me to financially support her. We were a couple, not a financial arrangement, and I was not interested in funding her sabbatical from life. Cindy's response, without missing a beat, was to call me a low provider. It took me a second to even process that because it was such a weird phrase, like something ripped out of a bad dating podcast or one of those toxic online relationship grifter accounts. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized it was also wildly inaccurate. If anything, I was more of a no provider. I am not into arrangements where I financially support a woman for companionship, and I was not about to start now. That was the point where I knew, with complete clarity, that our relationship was basically over. There was no big dramatic fight, no epic screaming match, just this cold, sinking certainty that we had hit a wall we were not going to get past. I decided that I would stay in the apartment we rented for the next 2 months, just long enough to get my finances sorted and find a new place, and then I would be out. There was no point in pretending things were salvageable, but I also was not about to nuke my own living situation on the spot. But then Cindy, either sensing that shift or just deciding to lean all the way into the chaos, started actively sabotaging me. It was not even subtle, not the kind of petty passive-aggressive stuff people do when they are annoyed with their partner. This was premeditated, deliberate attempts to screw with me in ways that made my life harder, both at home and at work. The first sign was last Friday. I was getting ready for work like usual, running through my mental checklist, and when I went to grab my shoes, they were just gone. Not in the closet, not by the door, not under the bed. I spent 15 minutes tearing the apartment apart before Cindy, with the fakest innocent smile I have ever seen, said she washed them. That was already suspicious because I am pretty sure Cindy has never washed anything that was not her own laundry or a single plate after dinner, but on Friday morning, out of nowhere, she decided it was absolutely critical to wash my work shoes. They were not just damp, they were soaking wet, completely unwearable. I ended up having to wear this ancient pair of Crocs I had shoved in the back of the closet, and they were at least 2 sizes too small. My feet were screaming by the time I got to my desk. That night, on the way home, I stopped at a store and bought a new pair of shoes. I did not even bring them into the apartment. I left them in my car because I was not about to play another round of where did Cindy hide my shoes. First thing in the morning. The next escalation came the very next day. I had told Cindy earlier in the week that I had a remote meeting on Saturday. It was not optional, and I specifically told her I needed the hour uninterrupted. Halfway through the meeting, my phone started blowing up with texts from Cindy. According to her, some guy was banging on our door, pounding on it so hard that she was scared to even look through the peephole. She insisted I needed to come home immediately. I keep a Ring camera pointed at our front door, so I pulled it up, half expecting to see some random guy losing his mind. There was nothing. No one at the door, no one even walking down the hallway. I texted Cindy back, telling her I saw nothing on the camera, and her response was, well, it must have been the neighbor's door. Except the neighbor's door is also visible on the camera, and there was nothing happening there either. That was when it all clicked. This was not panic or confusion. This was Cindy, fully aware of my meeting, making up a fake emergency to pull me away from work. It was not just petty anymore, it was calculated, and it was escalating. First the shoes, now this. I started running through the list of potential next moves, and the thought that stuck in my head was, the next escalation is going to be something physical, slash tires, cut brake lines, something that would leave me stranded or worse. I knew I could not stay in that apartment one more night. After work, I went straight back to the apartment, didn't even stop to say hello to Cindy, and gathered up my belongings as fast as I could. Essentials first, work clothes, important documents, toiletries, anything I absolutely could not afford to lose or have tampered with. I left a bunch of stuff behind, but at that point, I was not trying to move out so much as escape. Naturally, Cindy went off the rails when she realized I was leaving. Screaming, crying, accusing me of abandoning her, the whole 9 yards. I did not engage. There was nothing left to say. I just got in my car and drove. Now I'm at my buddy's house for a few days until I can find a new living situation. Update 2. It's been about a week since I left the apartment, and the amount of unhinged behavior I've uncovered since then is honestly mind-blowing. The first few days after I left were spent at my buddy's place, mostly just decompressing and trying to process everything that had gone down. The immediate sense of relief was undeniable. I could breathe without waiting for the next petty sabotage or manufactured crisis, but underneath that relief was this gnawing sense that I had only seen the tip of the iceberg. Cindy's behavior before I left had been escalating fast, and the more I thought about it, the more I realized it didn't come out of nowhere. People don't just wake up one day and decide to unravel their entire personality. There had to be more. Once I had a few uninterrupted hours to myself, I finally sat down with my laptop to go through my personal accounts, something I hadn't done in way too long. I had been so caught up in just surviving the day-to-day chaos that I hadn't paid much attention to my credit card statements or my online banking beyond the basics. That was my first mistake. The second I opened my transaction history, I knew something was wrong. There were charges I didn't recognize scattered throughout the past few months, some small enough to slip under the radar, others that should have set off alarm bells if I had been paying closer attention. Subscription boxes I had never heard of, random boutique online stores, luxury skincare products, even meal delivery services from places I had never ordered from, all delivered to our apartment, all under Cindy's name, all paid for with my card. It wasn't one or two accidental purchases. It was a pattern, a long-term campaign of siphoning my money for her personal indulgences. When I confronted her over text, her response was as infuriating as it was predictable. She brushed it off, called it a relationship perk, said we were in this together, like draining my bank account was some romantic gesture. There wasn't even a hint of remorse. It was just entitlement, plain and simple, like my financial autonomy ceased to exist the moment we started sharing an address. That alone would have been enough for me to write her off completely, but unfortunately, it was just the appetizer. The real gut punch came a couple of days later when I got a call from my company's HR department. They didn't sound angry, just very, very confused. Apparently, they had been contacted by several companies looking to verify my employment history after receiving job applications from me. Except I hadn't applied for any of those jobs. Not a single one. When HR forwarded me the applications, the pieces started falling into place. Cindy had been using my work email, my actual professional email tied directly to my job, to submit applications all over the place. Some of the roles were vaguely in my field, but plenty of them were completely out of left field. Entry-level positions I would never apply for, senior roles I couldn't possibly be qualified for, and even a handful of bizarre side gigs that had nothing to do with my skills or experience. The whole thing made zero sense. I couldn't figure out if her goal was to tank my reputation by making me look unstable and desperate, to get me fired by making my employer think I was trying to jump ship, or if she somehow thought she could fake her way into a job using my resume and contact information. None of the scenarios made any rational sense, but rationality clearly wasn't a driving force here. The sheer audacity of it knocked the wind out of me. I ended up having to sit down with my boss and lay out the entire mess, the breakup, the sabotage, the impersonation, just to get ahead of any fallout. It was humiliating, having to peel back my personal life like that in front of the people I work with, but I didn't have a choice. If I hadn't, my boss might have assumed I was genuinely trying to moonlight in half a dozen unrelated fields like some career-addicted lunatic. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place when I went back to the apartment to collect the rest of my belongings. I wasn't about to set foot in that place alone, so I called the non-emergency line and had a police officer accompany me. Cindy wasn't home when I arrived, probably off licking her wounds or plotting her next move, but her laptop was sitting wide open on the couch. It was too tempting not to look, and at that point, I figured I had every right to know what else had been going on under my nose. What I found wasn't a diary, at least not in the traditional sense. It was a running Google Doc, pages and pages long, where Cindy had been documenting her plans, not for her life, not for her career, but for how to motivate me into becoming a better provider. I sat there, reading in stunned silence, as the full extent of her manipulation unfolded in front of me. It wasn't impulsive. It wasn't heat-of-the-moment frustration. It was deliberate. Premeditated. She had spent months scripting her own version of reality, writing out fake emergencies she could stage to guilt me into paying her bills, practicing emotional monologues designed to trigger specific responses, even researching power phrases, actual psychological manipulation tactics she had pulled from online forums, all designed to systematically break down my confidence and replace it with guilt, fear, and obligation. It was the kind of calculated, almost clinical approach to control that you expect to see in movies about con artists, not in the personal files of someone you've lived with for years. I forwarded the whole document to my personal email, packed up the rest of my stuff, and locked up the apartment for the last time. Before I left, I called the landlord and told them I wouldn't be renewing the lease. Whatever happened to Cindy's stuff was no longer my problem. If she wanted to squat there until the lease ran out, that was between her and the building management. I had nothing left to give. Since then, I've been staying with my buddy, trying to process the sheer scale of what I've been through. It's not just the money, or the work sabotage, or even the calculated emotional warfare, it's the fact that someone I thought I knew so well had spent months, maybe even years, plotting ways to turn me into some broken, compliant puppet. Every argument we had, every fight over money, every guilt trip about not being ambitious enough, all of it was part of her script. I'm already looking at places in a different city. I need distance from all of this, physical distance, emotional distance, psychological distance. As for Cindy, I have no idea what she's doing, and I don't want to know. Update 3. Just when I thought the whole Cindy saga was over, life decided to throw me one last curveball, the kind that makes you question how well you ever really know anyone, even the person you shared a bed with for years. A few days after I moved out for good, I was still in that post-breakup fog where every day feels like some weird limbo between relief and disbelief. I was working on finding my own place, trying to piece together my finances, and generally just working through the psychic hangover of everything Cindy had put me through. That's when my phone rang. The number wasn't saved in my contacts, and I'm usually the type to let unknown calls go straight to voicemail, but for some reason, I felt like I should answer. Call it gut instinct or some subconscious knowledge that my time in the Cindy circus wasn't quite over yet. On the other end was a voice I hadn't heard in years, Cindy's ex-boss. Not from my company, but from the company she used to call her dream job, the one that shut down last year. The same job where, according to Cindy, she was beloved by her colleagues and devastated when the doors closed. It turns out Cindy had been rewriting history long before I ever caught on. Her ex-boss wasn't calling to catch up, and he definitely wasn't calling to reminisce about what a great employee Cindy had been. He was calling because while preparing some old records for legal purposes related to the company's closure, Cindy's name kept appearing in internal complaint files. Not just once or twice, but over and over again, a pattern so extensive that he felt compelled to follow up, even though she hadn't worked there in over a year. Apparently, Cindy had been under internal review for serious misconduct in the final months before the company folded. Not only was she not the golden employee she always made herself out to be, but they were actively preparing to fire her when the shutdown happened. In some twisted way, the company going under was the only thing that saved her from getting formally terminated, a fact she conveniently left out every time she told her woe is me story about her beloved workplace closing its doors. What was she actually doing? For starters, she had been using her work login to access her colleagues' private emails. Reading through their conversations, forwarding herself confidential files, even digging into HR records she had no business seeing. It didn't stop at simple snooping, either. She had been editing documents before they were officially submitted, tweaking other people's work to make herself look better in comparison. In at least one case, she deliberately introduced an error into someone else's report and then swooped in to discover the mistake right before it went out, positioning herself as some kind of last-minute hero. But the real jaw-dropper was why her ex-boss called me specifically. During his review of all the files she had forwarded to herself, he found an email with my name on it, something I had sent her back when we were both interns, just giving her some pointers on a group project we were both working on. Totally innocuous at the time. But Cindy, being Cindy, had saved that email, recycled parts of it into her own work years later, and, the truly insane part, built a contingency plan in case anyone ever noticed the plagiarism. Her plan was simple: if anyone connected the dots and realized her work looked suspiciously similar to mine, she would just claim that I helped her, as if that made corporate espionage perfectly fine. The fact that she had been dragging my name into her schemes long before we ever moved in together made me feel physically ill. The final insult came when her boss mentioned how he got my current number. Cindy had listed me as her reference, not from when we worked together years ago, but within the last 2 weeks. While I was physically moving my stuff out of our shared apartment, while I was discovering her sabotage and her psychotic journal of manipulation tactics, she was actively trying to leverage my name and my career to land herself a new job. No permission, no heads up, just slapping my name down as if I was some kind of human stepping stone, like it was my duty to vouch for her after everything. I told her ex-boss everything. The fake emergencies, the sabotaging my work shoes, the flood of bogus job applications in my name, the creepy journal detailing how she planned to break me down psychologically, every disgusting detail I had uncovered over the last few weeks. He thanked me, but it wasn't the polite, detached thanks you get from a stranger. It was the kind of thanks you hear from someone who's just had their worst suspicions confirmed. He promised to pass my number along if any future employers contacted him for a reference, which tells me Cindy's self-sabotage tour is far from over. When I hung up, I didn't feel vindicated. There was no sense of victory, no triumphant feeling that justice had been served. If anything, I just felt drained. Like I had been tricked into starring in some psychological thriller where the villain was someone I once trusted completely. Cindy had been living in her own alternate reality for so long that I don't think she even remembers what it's like to exist without manipulating the people around her. As of today, I've blocked Cindy on everything. No social media, no phone, no email. There's no reason for her to contact me, and if there's one thing I've learned, it's that she will absolutely try if I leave even the smallest crack open. The only contact link left is with the landlord, and that's purely in case there's any legal fallout related to the lease. Beyond that, I want nothing to do with her, ever again. Looking back, it's honestly staggering how much I excused, ignored, or rationalized over the years. Every red flag I chalked up to stress, every weird manipulative comment I brushed off as insecurity, every minor sabotage I told myself wasn't worth fighting about, it all built into this monstrous pattern of control that I didn't fully see until I was already standing outside of it. Cindy wasn't always like this, or at least I don't think she was, but who she was back when we met doesn't matter anymore. Sometimes people aren't who they were when you met them, and holding on to who they were is the fastest way to lose yourself along with them. I'm done. Cindy can rewrite history however she wants, but I'm not going to be part of her story anymore. As for Cindy, I have no idea what she's doing, and I don't want to know.